You know what, guys? I think it's finally time that we talk about the infamous rapper, singer, artist, cult leader, whatever you want to call him, XXXTentacion. Because I don't really think it's much of a secret that I've been working on a massive documentary about his life and career over the past couple months, with my original plan being to put it out about a week after the Trippy Red video, although unfortunately I've been running into a couple issues. Now don't get me wrong, it has nothing to do with the research or timeline part of things, because first of all, X was very famous during the time that he was alive, meaning there's a lot of media coverage about him, and second of all, he didn't live very long, which on one hand makes it a lot simpler to put together a timeline of his entire life, although X did do quite a bit in only 20 years of being alive, and because of that, it is kind of hard to figure out exactly where certain pieces go, but that's not really the main issue that I'm having. The main issue comes down to narrative, because when it comes to XXXTentacion, nobody's really neutral on him. If you're at all aware of him in any capacity, you either feel that he's one of the greatest artists to ever live, somebody who absolutely changed the music industry forever and passed away tragically young, or you believe that he's one of the worst people to ever live and we collectively failed as an entire society by allowing him to get famous, with both of these extremes feeling very real in their own right, although of course everything in reality falls somewhere more in the middle. But that middle is hard to find when everybody is so extreme on one side or the other. Although when you take the time to look at his life, it makes sense why people feel so strongly about him from one perspective or the other perspective. Because even before he ever got famous, he was a very controversial figure in the Florida underground, with him constantly beefing with people, getting into fights, and more often than not, almost every single show that he went to ended up getting shut down early by the police because the fans that he would attract were so crazy and out there that oftentimes it would turn into a riot. And you would think that that would turn people away from him, but I mean, we're talking about Florida in 2015. That type of energy was basically everywhere, and nobody captured it better than X himself. I mean, all you really need to do is take one listen to the type of music that he was making at the time, and you fully understand what type of person he was. He was chaotic, he was loud, he was out there. And of course, when you're portraying that type of persona, you're going to attract very like-minded individuals. And because of that, before long, he built a very solid cult fan base that was able to rival even some of the biggest rappers from the Florida underground, including Space Ghost Perp. And yes, I know, I'm talking about Space Ghost Perp again, but you kind of have to understand that at the time in 2014, 2013, and somewhat 2015, while he was starting to be hated by a pretty big majority of the artists who worked with him, you still had to pay him his respects. People would shit on him here and there, but nobody would really go full in talking about how terrible of a guy he truly was until X decided to step up to the plate and make that diss track, of course, being, well,
Space Ghost Pussy.
and yes, guys, I do know that
Space Ghost Pussy.
wasn't a diss track that came out of nowhere. It was a retaliation to the fact that Perp was dissing ASAP Yams after he passed away. But let's not miss the point of what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is that X was willing to punch the biggest guy in the room when nobody else was willing to. And that's basically the mentality that he carried into the actual rap game once he started to break through into the mainstream. X always had that underdog status. He always felt like the artist that people wanted to see win because it felt like he never should have been able to. The industry never had a person like X before. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was plenty of people afterwards, but he was really one of the first ones to go, fuck it, I'm gonna diss whoever I want, I'm gonna go after whoever I want, and I'm not gonna worry about the ramifications, which probably hurt him in the long run, but a lot of people also really fucked with that energy. So when the time came for him to finally blow up with his track Look at Me, people were already very tapped in. He was finally getting the recognition that he deserved, and his cult fan base would only continue to grow. And when that song finally started to go viral, it felt like X was getting the recognition that he always deserved. Even the wider hip hop community was giving him his flowers. You had ASAP Rocky giving him a cosign, you had Kanye West giving him a cosign, and even Kendrick Lamar. So now that X was no longer an underdog, what was he gonna do? Well, we would never find out because he would once again return to that underdog status only about a couple months later when it was revealed that the reason that he went to prison in the first place was because he ended up being pregnant girlfriend so badly that she had a miscarriage. And of course, when an allegation like that comes out, everybody starts to jump ship. You had all of those people who were willing to work with him early in his career, no longer wanting to. Even some of his longtime friends like Ski Mask the Slump God, as well as Kid Trunks, would start to sever ties, despite the fact that he basically gave them a career by allowing them to come along with him on the Revenge Tour when he was at the absolute peak of his fame. But the second that shit hit the fan, they would all completely abandon him. And that's not me trying to make you feel sympathetic for X, I'm simply trying to express why his deeper fan base would once again feel like he was getting the short end of the stick. Although I do feel like a lot of people miss the bigger picture of what exactly went down here, because many people feel like it's hypocritical. I mean, Drake has allegations, Famous Dex has allegations, Tekashi 69, basically everybody who was popping off at the time had allegations. And while yes, some of them did have their careers ruined over it in the long run, at the time, nobody really paid all that much attention to it, leading a lot of people to wonder, why did everybody focus so much attention on XXXTentacion? It doesn't seem fair. But here's the real reason why. X was a very rare case. He didn't get famous in spite of the allegations, he got famous because of the allegations. Because it was that very same mugshot that was taken of him after his girlfriend that went on to become a meme online and got his song Look at Me to blow up the way that it did. If it wasn't for him going to prison at the time that he went to prison, he probably never would have blown up the way that he did. Imagine doing the worst thing that you've ever done in your life and not only being barely punished for it, but actually being rewarded for it by money, fame, and everything you've ever wanted. It's a pretty weird case. And because of that, it's so hard to disattach X from the allegations, because unlike Famous Dex, who had a couple years of being really in the spotlight before all of that unsavory stuff came out,
Cookie Monster. Yeah.
X immediately popped off, had a couple months where everybody loved him, and then the other shoe dropped, and immediately the truth was revealed. Everything is so tightly connected that when you talk about him, you basically have to mention the whole thing. You can't simply push it to the side and pretend like it never happened, because it plays a big part of how he got to where he was. But despite that, do you think that his cult fanbase felt the same way? No, of course not. They had watched him scrape his way bit by bit into the spotlight, only to have absolutely everything taken away from him right at the finish line. It didn't feel fair. And I think people truly forget how ostracized X truly was from the rap industry. He couldn't get an interview. He couldn't even get media attention of any kind that wasn't completely negative, basically putting him in an unwinnable position, with him not being able to express how he felt or even being able to defend himself in any capacity besides on smaller platforms like No Jumper and Academics, which nowadays really doesn't sound all that crazy. I mean, after all, Academics and No Jumper are now absolutely massive media platforms, but at the time, the mainstream industry still controlled the narrative on almost everything in the rap industry, and they had made their claim known. They didn't want to fuck with XXXTentacion. So you would think with him being in a position like this, he would go completely negative, saying, fuck you, fuck the industry, nobody wants to see me do well, so I'm basically going to play the villain that everybody already thinks I am. And while he would try to do that for a little bit of time, he quickly realized that feeding into the negativity wasn't going to get him anywhere, so he began to move towards a much more positive direction, with him reflecting on his past actions and trying to become a better person. And this is really where he rose to the status of godhood. Everybody in the younger generation was looking up to him. They were waiting for his next Instagram live. They related to him. They felt like he was speaking for a lost generation that didn't have the words to express how they felt. Trippie Redd is a rapper. Tekashi 69, a rapper. Lil Pump, barely a rapper, but he's a rapper. But XXXTentacion was a poet. He was a voice of an entire generation. And while many people, including myself, feel like he only tried to do this to make himself look better in the eyes of the court, as at the time he was facing a lot of time in prison as they wanted to make an example out of him, to many people who had looked up to him for years, he was starting to feel bigger than the industry. He was starting to feel like he might even be bigger than humanity as a whole. I know it sounds absolutely deranged, but there was a pretty good majority of his fan base that was praising him as if he was some form of god. And just when it felt that he was finally starting to turn a new leaf and take himself into a better position, he would end up passing away. in seemingly a completely pointless and random event, where he ended up passing away in a robbery gone wrong, where a bunch of random people from his local neighborhood ended up running up on him in a car and taking his life for seemingly no reason. And when somebody who feels like they're larger than life ends up passing away so suddenly, people weren't able to believe that it really happened. And because of that, a lot of people would start to speculate that his death might have not been completely random, with many conspiracy theories starting to pop up all over the internet. Now, don't get me wrong, this wasn't an isolated incident, as after Little Pete passed away, a lot of speculation would start to take off online about his friends being the ones who killed him. I've never really understood why people believe that. I mean, after all, if he was the most popular one in the group, why would they want him dead? That would cut off all the money they were making. I guess people thought that they wanted revenge for him leaving them in the dirt, but I mean, if you're gonna kill somebody over that, you're completely sociopathic, and I think there would have been some proof of that being the case. And then if you go a little bit into the future and look at the passing of Juice WRLD, a lot of people speculate that there might have been foul play there as well, with his label possibly having a hand in it, or maybe his girlfriend at the time being the one who blew the whistle on the whole operation. Now, this one is a little bit more plausible than the Little Peep one, because there actually are people around Juice WRLD who could have had a reason to want him dead. Because Internet Money had kind of a pattern of finding extremely drug addicted kids on SoundCloud who had barely any audience to their name, and then flying them out to California and giving them an entire career. And yes, I know almost everybody from the SoundCloud era was doing drugs, and it wasn't really all that out of the ordinary for the time. But still, if you're some massive company who's going to pump a bunch of money into making somebody famous, wouldn't you think that you wouldn't want to find somebody who's already heavily addicted to drugs? It's kind of like going to the side of the road, finding a random meth head and saying, you know what, kid, I'm going to take you places. I know a lot of people would make the argument that Juice WRLD was so good at making music that they had to pick him because nobody else had that type of talent. But let's be honest, when it comes to Internet Money's production, they could have taken any random kid and made them equally as famous. And that's not me trying to take a shot at Juice WRLD. I do think he's very talented, but to think that Internet Money absolutely needed him and they couldn't find anybody to replace him is definitely not true. I mean, they did find somebody to replace him. Almost immediately after he passed away, all of a sudden the Kid Laroi would start to pop off in a big way, with them saying that he was the prodigy of Juice WRLD, despite the fact that the two of them were very rarely ever seen around each other before Juice passed away. Yes, I know they went on a tour together, but he also did shows with Little Tecca and Little Mosey. It would be like saying that Little Mosey was randomly the prodigy of Juice WRLD after they only went on one tour together. It's kind of weird and out of nowhere, but despite that, I still don't think that Grade A was purposely trying to kill Juice WRLD. I just don't think they were all that upset when it ended up happening, because he made so much music during his life that they knew they could release it until the end of time. Also, the whole having a bunch of weed on the plane and a bunch of lean, why were they trying to traffic drugs with one of their most popular artists ever? It really doesn't make sense when you get down to it, but we're not here to talk about Juice WRLD, we're here to talk about XXXTentacion, who once again I feel like is a very rare case when it comes to the conspiracies around him, because when it comes to Peep and Juice, nobody really believes the conspiracy theories about them anymore, but when it comes to the conspiracy theories about X, it seems like at least half of the fan base really believes that X may have been murdered by a bigger player in the rap game, somebody who didn't want him around, somebody who saw him as a threat, and the main person that people point to is Drizzy Drake himself. And there's definitely a lot of reasons to believe this to be true, as after all, Drake and X actually had beef during the time that X was alive. Because as soon as X ended up getting out of prison and Look at Me started to blow up, he would immediately do an interview calling out Drake, saying that he stole his flow on the track KMT, as well as going further into detail about how Drake actually wanted to reach out to him early on, but then for whatever reason, he ended up going ghost on X, and then a couple months later, Drake ends up dropping this track called KMT with the very same flow from Look at Me. It seems like it's not a coincidence.
Okay, Demon just got out of can. I gave my bro an advance.
And while this wasn't exactly new information, with there being plenty of rumors that Drake had ghostwriters, that he took smaller artist flows, and would even sign some of his biggest competition to OVO so he could cripple their career and take all of their best unreleased music and basically make it into his own, which isn't even really a rumor. If you look at I Love McConan, that's exactly what Drake ended up doing to him. He had one of the biggest songs in the world, and nowadays he's working at a McDonald's, so OVO definitely fucked him over pretty hard. But despite it being an open secret within the industry that Drake was kind of a slimy guy, it was still pretty crazy for a new artist like X to take shots at him right at the very start of his career. I mean, at this point, he should have been trying to be more low key, not really trying to rock the boat too much, but X didn't give a fuck and he would immediately punch the biggest guy in the room once again, something that he did when he was in the underground and now something that he was doing when he was in the mainstream industry. Like I said, X was not your average artist, and because of that, he was scaring a lot of people who had been in the industry for years at this point. He was basically starting to fuck with the status quo. And surprisingly, this would actually get back to Drake, with him basically responding by saying, "I have no idea who X is. Do you really think I was going through SoundCloud looking for random songs to steal the flow from? I mean, nobody knew who he was before he ended up going to prison." But that's far from the case, because even before Look at Me started to go viral in 2017, it already had 1 million streams on SoundCloud, meaning that there was a very good possibility that Drake did hear it. And considering the fact that one of Drake's DJs would say that they actually ended up reaching out to X before he even went to prison, the two of them definitely did have some form of connection that Drake was trying his best to hide away from. But I mean, come on guys, do you really think Drake was gonna pay to have X murdered because he made him look a little bit goofy in the headlines? It really doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But once you start to look deeper into it, there's a little bit more proof. Because X would go on to say that if he ended up getting murdered, Drake was definitely the person behind it. So that's basically proof right there. I mean, X is saying that if he dies, Drake did it, and then he died like a couple months later. So Drake must have done it. And it's not like Drake was trying very hard to keep it a secret either, because only a couple weeks after X passed away, he would put out an album called Scorpion, which had a track on it called I'm Upset, with the entire thing being about how somebody tried to pay to have him murdered and it didn't work, and now he's upset. There was also a line in the song where he said that he only ever shoots below the neck, XXX, which apparently was supposed to be referring to the fact that when he takes naked pictures of himself, he only ever shoots below the neck because he doesn't want people to see his face, because then his penis would get leaked online. You get the point. And then of course, XXX is referring to the fact that porn movies are often rated X, but if you look at it a different way, you can immediately tell that he's talking about XXXTentacion. I mean, I only ever shoot below the neck. X literally got shot in the throat. Do you really think that that's a coincidence? I don't know. Not to mention, only a couple days after that, Drake would end up appearing in a music video alongside Travis Scott for the song Sicko Mode, where you can see a very quick shot of somebody who looks exactly like XXXTentacion being crushed by the moon. And when you keep in mind that one of X's biggest songs ever was called Moonlight, and because of that, it's not very hard to see exactly what Drake was trying to imply, that X was basically crushed by the weight of his own success, that if he never flew so close to the sun, he never would have got burnt, and he might be alive now. And if all of that wasn't bad enough, in more recent times, Drake would once again diss him on the track On BS, where he would talk about, I don't really know what, a bunch of numbers, but then he would basically say if that guy held his tongue on Instagram Live, he would still be alive right now, which many people think may be a reference to X. So there you have it. You have the motive, you have X himself saying that if he was murdered, it was Drake, and then you have Drake himself talking about the fact that he ended up getting X shot below the neck. I mean, lock him up, guys. We have all the proof that we need. But no, for real, when you start to take a step back and look at the entire conspiracy from a closer angle, you quickly realize that there's a couple different cracks in the foundation. First of all, X was always talking about dying. He also made a joke one time saying that if he ever got killed, Tankhead was the one who did it. So for everybody thinking that Drake is the culprit, you also have to put Tankhead in that very same category, because if X's word is law, then that means that Tankhead should also be locked up for murder. Oh wait, he already is, but he should be locked up again for X's murder. But no, obviously X must have been joking about Tankhead taking him out. But if you truly believe that somebody was gonna kill you, why would you make a joke implicating somebody else as well? So when it comes down to it, he was either completely serious about both of them, or he was joking in both cases. And I'm kind of leaning towards him joking about it. On top of that, there's actually an explanation for why he said that he thought Drake was going to kill him. Basically, when the two of them were beefing, X thought that it was a funny idea to post a picture of Drake on Twitter where it looked like he had male fluid on his face. Academics would immediately hit him up and tell him that he shouldn't do that because Drake would blackball him if he kept dissing him in that type of way. So X would immediately pretend that his Twitter got hacked and he wasn't the one who actually posted it, but then he would go on to say that if he ever died, Drake was the one behind it, basically implying that Drake has a lot of power, but not actually implying that Drake was gonna flat out murder him. But what about Drake implying in his own music that he was the one behind it? I mean, it's totally possible with all the money and power that he has, he might have paid somebody off to get X taken out. But just because somebody has the power to do something doesn't necessarily mean that they're gonna do it. I think the reason that Drake was putting lines like that on his album is because he wants to have the whole persona being a big mob boss who can get anybody taken out no matter where they are in the world. I mean, people have been saying for years that Drake is a fake gangster, but the second that X passes away, all of a sudden he's a mastermind who was able to set it all up without getting caught. And when you really think about it, there's way too many factors at play. Do you really think Drake went to Travis Scott and said, "Hey man, I just got X taken out. Could you possibly put a little thing in your music video where a moon falls on him so I can imply that I got him murdered?" I mean, I know Travis Scott isn't exactly the best person on the planet, but do you really think he'd be like, "Yeah, okay, fine"? I don't know. It's kind of a fun thing to speculate about, but when it really comes down to it, I don't think that it really holds together. But I'm definitely in the minority when it comes to that opinion because there's many people who truly believe with all of their soul that Drake actually got X taken out by paying to have him killed. Funny story, there was actually a time last year when the entire Kendrick and Drake beef was going on that I ended up clicking on this guy's profile who absolutely hated Drake, and I would immediately assume that he was a big glazer of Kendrick's, with him only really going after Drake because, well, Kendrick doesn't like Drake, so we have to hate him too. But as soon as I ended up clicking on his profile, I was immediately proven wrong because he actually had a story archive going all the way back to 2018 with him talking about every little scandal that Drake had gotten into in that time. This guy was a dedicated hater, and I was honestly a little bit impressed. I mean, he didn't jump on the bandwagon when it got popular, he had been hating before it was cool. But then I would start to think, what did Drake do that made this guy so mad? I mean, there has to be something that would piss him off that much. Was he a giant fan of McCone? Oh, okay, he thinks that Drake killed X. Wow. 7 years of your life believing in a conspiracy theory? I mean, bang up job, dude. A1 dedication to hating one person for all that period of time, but I can't believe that you did it because of Drake killing X when it's never even been proven. But you know what, sir? Continue to do what you're doing because honestly, I don't know what else you would do if you weren't doing that. You probably burned down a hospital or something, so it might be better if you focus all your negative attention on hating Drake. But anyways, now that we have all of that cleared up, why don't we get on to conspiracy theory number 2, that X actually ended up selling his soul to Satan himself. Or, well, not Satan, apparently Heke, who is one of the 12 kings of hell. I don't really know too much about demon lore, keep all that Satan shit away from me, but yeah, not Satan, another guy. And the reason so many people believe this to be true is because there's actually a leaked prison phone call where X talks a little bit about how he's praying to Heke and that he's hoping that Heke can get him out of prison.
Shit. Heke, goddess of crossroads, darkness, witchcraft, wisdom, and the moon. Please come to me.
Huh?
Please come to me.
Please.
Please come to me.
Please.
Heke.
Please come to me. Please, Heke.
Yeah.
Please.
Protect me and bring me freedom.
Protect me and bring me freedom.
Through this sacrifice.
Bring me freedom through this. Through the sacrifice, okay.
Treat me as if one of your own.
Treat me.
He also has an entire song saying, "I talked to the devil in Miami and he told me everything was going to be okay." And this kind of leads into an entire conspiracy that X actually knew that he was going to pass away at the age that he was and that he was putting all the hints in his music to try to warn people that he wouldn't be there for much longer. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you there's absolutely no Satan shit when it comes to the music industry. There's definitely plenty of that. But when it comes to X, I don't think that he actually talked to the devil himself. If you guys are unaware, he used to have a manager in his early career going by the name of Bruno, and Bruno had this house, trap house, I don't know what you wanted to call it, but it was primarily used as a backdrop for people to shoot amateur and a place for small-time rappers to do drugs. And at this trap house, there happens to be a painting of a demon on the wall, and one time when X was doing acid, that demon began to speak to him, and that's where the song "I Went to Miami and Spoke to the Devil, and he told me everything would be okay" comes from. Now, I don't know if you people believe in acid being able to break down the walls between different realms. If you do, then, well, maybe you still believe that he talked to the actual Satan. But if you don't believe in any of that, X simply was hallucinating and he thought a random painting was talking to him. Sorry to ruin the fun, I know it's not really as cool as summoning the devil in your prison cell, but, well, that's what happened. But hey man, if you still want to believe in it, I'm not trying to ruin your fun. I simply want to give people a different perspective on many of these famous conspiracy theories. I know the people who wholeheartedly believe in them are never really going to budge on that, and it's not like they're hurting anybody by believing in it, so you know what? Have your fun. But with all of that said, let's go on to the final conspiracy theory. Now, this one isn't really all that widespread, and I'm not really sure if anybody outside of the circles that I'm in really believe in it, but honestly, it's kind of compelling. I was originally told about this by a friend, and then I had somebody in my Discord server repeat a very similar theory, so at least a couple people agree with it, and honestly, I might agree with it too. And that's the theory that X actually committed suicide. Now, I know that sounds completely crazy, deranged, and honestly impossible considering the fact that we saw his murder on camera and it's pretty obvious that it was a murder. But you gotta keep in mind the headspace that X was in right at the end of his life. I mean, he had a very hard childhood. His mother never really gave a fuck about him, his grandparents never really loved him, and because of that, he spent his entire life looking for family. He would lash out time and time again, constantly getting in trouble with the law, but one of the times that he was locked up in prison, he ended up meeting his best friend in the world, Mr. Stokely Pokely himself, Ski Mask the Slump God, and the two of them would begin to make music together after they both got out. But unfortunately, as his fame continued to rise, he would find himself in more and more trouble, going back to prison time and time again. He put absolutely everything he had in his life into music, even tattooing his face before he ever had any form of fame, and when it finally began to take off, it was immediately taken away from him about as quickly as it came. And on top of that, all of these friends that he had found along the way, Members Only, Kid Trunk, Ski Mask the Slump God, Craig Zen, all of these people who he had tried his best to help out had now cut him off and didn't want to fuck with him anymore. And on top of that, he wasn't even really able to enjoy all the money and fame that he had gotten because, well, he knew that prison time wasn't far away. He had fought this case over the course of a year and finally got the victim to drop it, but then the state would immediately pick it back up and was trying to package in a bunch of other stuff all at once, and he was looking at about 10 to 20 years in prison, which he wouldn't survive. I mean, he already had a lot of mental problems before he went to prison, and 10 years behind bars would fuck anybody up long term. And during that time, he essentially knew that he was going to rot away. I mean, it's not like nobody would support him, but after 10 long years from 2018 to 2028 of being behind bars, do you really think his fan base would still be fucking with him the same way that they were back in 2016? I mean, look at people like Bobby Shmurda. People continued to talk about him during the time that he was locked up, but when he got out, nobody really seemed to care anymore. It's way too much time away. All the people who grew up with his music weren't really around anymore. And I think to X, that was his biggest fear ever. He didn't care if he was loved, he didn't care if he was hated, but he didn't want to be forgotten. He didn't want people to not care about him anymore. He felt alone his entire life, and there's not much of a more lonely place than prison. On top of that, I think X was very concerned about his legacy and what exactly he would be remembered for after he passed away. That's probably one of the biggest reasons why he was always talking about dying. He never really talked about it like, oh, I want to die because I'm in so much pain. It was more like, after I die, I want so many people to remember me. I want to make sure that before I go, I can make 4 million kids happy. That's all he really wanted. And I think he wanted that because his biggest fear was being remembered as nothing more than a, well, woman beater. And with the walls closing in on him and him feeling like there was no other way out besides getting locked up for all that time, I think he might have tried to tempt fate. He decided to go back to his old hood with a fuck ton of money in a duffel bag. He didn't take any form of security despite the fact that Tankhead was begging him to take somebody along with him. And I think the reason for that is because the dude was incredibly depressed. I mean, he didn't even change his clothes for about 3 days before he passed away, and him going back to his old hood carrying all that money was probably his way of saying, come on, do it. If I really can't even walk around my old neighborhood without being in fear of my life, then what type of life is that? If you really want to take me out, if you really believe that I deserve karma for my past actions and that I truly can't change, then do it. And well, unfortunately, he tempted fate a little bit too much and somebody would show up. They ended up cornering him in the car. The other guy got out and ran away, but X would continue to sit there and face his fate head on, with him actually grabbing the gun the robber had, leading to a little bit of a back and forth, and unfortunately, he was shot. And with that one action, he would preserve his legacy forever. He would no longer be set to rot away in a prison cell until the end of his days, with all of his fans, friends, and family moving on, and his reputation getting worse and worse as the years went on, and people started to lose those rose-colored glasses around him and his career. But with him now dying at his prime, it meant that that nostalgia was going to stick a lot longer. He knew that the people who hated him would never like him again. He knew that he was going to have his past actions thrown in his face time and time again. Even if he was able to escape the prison time, he would never have a clean reputation again. But a dead man can do no wrong. And while eventually the culture would shift and people would start to look back at him from a more negative perspective, for a couple years' time, everybody looked back on X fondly. Did he have a rocky legacy? Sure, but he had a legacy. And if he hadn't have passed during the time that he did, I don't know if he would be remembered the same way that he is right now. He may not have been able to save his life and career, but he was at least able to preserve his legacy forever. Whether or not people love him or hate him, people will always remember XXXTENTACION. And some people believe that he knew that before he ended up going to that motorcycle shop on that fateful day. Now, obviously, we're never going to know for sure. We can't know what was going on in his head during the time that all of that was going down. But out of the three conspiracy theories, I think it might be the most believable, although most people are probably going to say that the Drake one is a lot more believable. But either way, I thought it was kind of interesting to bring up. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. And while you're down there, let me know what you think about X himself and the legacy that he left behind. Do you think that in 10 years he'll be remembered as one of the best artists to ever live? Or do you think people will look back on him as more of a cautionary tale? I really don't know, but well, I'm going to think more about it and get back to working on that XXXTentacion documentary. So if you guys want to see that, make sure to let me know. Like, subscribe, all that other shit. Leave a burger emoji if you got to the end of the video. And with all of that said, I will see you in the next one. We're cooking, we keep it going. But yeah, rest in peace to X.